So, who's hungry? Venom! So, I've been talking about this one and all the ways it could possibly go wrong for so long. I think honestly it would have been remiss of me not to actually watch and now review the thing. So, it's fine. In a way, I almost kind of wish it was worse. I mean, granted, part of that's my headspace today. I'll be blunt about it. A day of recording, I've had a really lousy day. And I was kind of hoping for something that was going to be utter trash. Just like, not so that I could rip into it, but just as like a cleanser. I don't know if this experience makes any sense, but like last year, around the same time, actually, when I was still doing 90s Comics Retrial as a podcast, I had a lousy day, but then I read Brigade #1 for that podcast, and it's an awful comic, but it was exactly the right level of stupid for me in that moment. And I loved the reading experience as much as it was a bad comic, and I kind of hoped for something along those lines with Venom. And honestly, it's a little bit too good for that. That said, it's not great. Here's what they got right. The character of Venom himself. I do want to emphasize the character. The effects they're not bad. They're not especially well integrated. The effects never look like they are physically there in the same world as real people. Is basically what it comes down to. So, you know, when you have the symbiote sort of come off him a little bit and he's talking to the face, you can tell he's looking through it. It doesn't look like he's looking at anything. And that effect where the like part of the head opens and you see part of his face, that looks terrible now. It looked terrible in the trailer. So, you know, the effects are iffy, but when I say they got the character right, I do mean the character. I am surprised how well Eddie Brock works, and actually how well they were able to capture his failings in the absence of Spider-Man, because usually Eddie's failings as a character are funneled through his blaming of Spider-Man for all of his problems and his hatred of him. So when you remove that, I think the question most of us had was, how do you retain that element of his character when the mechanism by which we've always had it in the comics is gone? And they actually did it pretty decently. I'll end up getting into spoilers a little bit later, but sort of initially, basically, like, he's a guy who he's kind of a righteous jerk. I mean, honestly, you know, he wants to do good. He's a investigative reporter. He's looking into, you know, the issues of homelessness, and he's trying to take care of people, and he knows the name of the doorman at the newspaper he works at, or the news organization, or whatever it is, and like he knows the name of the woman at the convenience store he goes to, and he knows the name of the homeless woman, you know, so like he knows people and he cares about people, but at the same time he is a bit of a self-serving jerk. So like, and this is not really a spoiler, it happens very early. He steals information from his fiance, who is a lawyer for this company that he has suspicions about, and he sees that she gets an email about a case because her firm represents this company, and he steals that information. And what ends up happening after that is he gets fired, she gets fired, but he then proceeds to blame the guy who runs this company, a guy named Drake. That's Rez Ahmed's character. And he blames Drake for everything, but Anne very rightfully points out to him, you did this. This is your fault. These are the consequences of your actions. And it does manage to capture, you know, the fact that the guy's kind of a jerk. Like, he loses sight of the impact of what he does. He doesn't always think it through, but when that happens, when he screws up, he doesn't he doesn't accept blame for that. He blames an external source. And by retaining that actually stays really true to Eddie as a character. And then the dynamic between him and Venom, the symbiote, yes, they, despite the early trailer saying symbiote, it's very obvious that they went back and re-recorded all the dialogue to say symbiote after the internet basically shamed all of Sony by the fact that they didn't pronounce the darn thing right in the trailers. But I like his interaction with the symbiote as well. And I will say that relationship and that dynamic is not nearly as front and center as it should be, or at least the development of it. It feels like it jumps forward at several points across the movie. Like, we jump to it talking to him pretty quickly. We then jump to the two of them arguing before we've even really gotten a sense of much of anything, and then it's like feeling like, oh, they've got a real connection. We're getting all these things, and they're points that like it work, but like we're missing the connective tissue of how this relationship between them is developing. It just kind of jumps from point to point to point, which is unfortunate because it is one of the highlights of the movie. I do think overall that Eddie himself and him and the symbiote are the best parts of the movie. I just wish they were in a better movie. And I mean, that's what it comes down to. This is real bog standard. If you asked like your average comic book reader to outline a Venom movie without Spider-Man, I would lay down money. 9 out of 10 of them are going to outline basically this movie. It's very by the numbers. It's very predictable. It is exactly what you would think it would be plot-wise. There's really nothing unexpected that happens in the entirety of the thing. It just kind of chugs its way along what you'd expect. Establishing Eddie. Eddie's now down on his luck. Eddie gets a tip. Eddie gets the symbiote. Eddie is on the run from people who want to get the symbiote back. There's another guy with a symbiote. He's got to fight that guy with the symbiote. That's what it is. And again, I'm not going to spoiler any of that because actually all of that was information you had in the trailer. So, unfortunately, it's just a bit dull. As far as the rating goes, the fact that it's PG-13 instead of R, it's really easy to see where the cuts were made. I do not believe that it would have been a substantively different film if it was R. I think it's just a matter of all the kills with, tendrils and people getting stabbed with bits of symbiote and people getting their heads bitten off and whatever else are just fairly bloodless. I feel confident in saying that the R-rated version of this probably would have been exactly what you see, maybe with a few more F-bombs, and there would have been blood splatter added to a lot of the action scenes, but otherwise probably would have been the exact same movie. So Eddie is good. Also, his performance chemistry with Michelle Williams, who plays Anne, his fiance, very quickly ex-fiance, that works. They've got good chemistry together. But then the plot is basic. Like it's not bad, but it's so boilerplate. It is so generic. It's like they forgot to come up with the twist on the formula. It feels very plug and play. It feels like it's the exact same structure that you could use for almost any anti-hero story. It really does. But then we get to the thing that just flat out does not work. That's the villain. That's Drake. He's awful. He's really terrible. And it's a shame because there's one moment where I see the version of Drake that would have worked. And this is a little bit later on, and there's a scene where he is talking to someone, trying to get them to give him information, and he sort of goes, no, look, just listen to me. And he talks very sincerely, very calmly, and in a way that is believable that someone would trust him in that moment. Unfortunately, it doesn't work because even prior to that, we've seen him giving his villain monologue. This guy monologues so much, like, the world on the brink of collapse. Human beings are the parasite. Like, oh my God. It's like the book of megalomaniacal villain cliches, and he just memorized all the quotes. It's so bad. And also most of the really dumb things circle around him and or his organization. I'm going to start getting into specifics of later plot stuff, so maybe consider that spoilers. If you really like Venom as a character, maybe give it a whirl, because as a character, he does pretty well. But overall, the movie, it's the epitome of a wait for streaming and rent it thing for me, as far as I'm concerned. But, so, there were parts that I laughed out loud when I was not supposed to be laughing out loud. There were actually a fair number of flat out good jokes, mostly having to do with the interaction between Eddie and Venom. But there's parts. There's a chase scene. You've seen it in the trailers. It's the classic San Francisco chase scene. Go whoa, boom, over the big hills and whatnot. So that scene's going on, and they're chasing Eddie with drones, which, okay, it's San Francisco, it's Silicon Valley, and the Life Foundation or corporation or whatever the heck it is seems to have its fingers in a lot of pies. It's into space exploration and pharmaceuticals and advanced tech and presumably all this sort of stuff. So the fact that they have drones isn't what I question. It's that these drones are just being flown at like impact. They're just being flown down to impact him, and they blow up on impact. So they're being flown into the street, into cars, and like all this stuff is just blowing up. First of all, that's the stupidest use I can possibly think of for a drone. And I mean, like, you're leaving behind so much evidence. Like, it hits the ground and it explodes, and now all of a sudden there's shrapnel and there's components and there's all this stuff that the police are going to be picking through because you just blew up a section of the street with your friggin' drone. And it's just so ridiculous that this happens in the middle of San Francisco, and we're in what is ostensibly supposed to be the real world that this is happening. It's like, it is some of the stupidest things I've seen trying to be passed off for a world that is more or less meant to be reality. And this is compounded by the fact that, the guy's got a rocket. First of all, he's got a rocket like within spitting distance of a major metropolitan area. That's thing one. And then thing two, he the bad guy arranges for a launch, and he's like, no, we're not going to do the prep. Do it now. It's like, yeah, because you don't need clearance like from the friggin' Air Force or who knows whatever else before you launch a rocket on U.S. soil. What the oh my God. I mean, like, the fact that he could just order it like on a whim. It's like, yeah, no. And I mean, like, that, maybe that's overly nitpicky. It didn't bother me that much, but like, it's dumb. It's really dumb. And it's unfortunate. I just wish the movie was better. And the villain isn't great even when he gets his own symbiote and becomes Riot. He's just kind of there, and he doesn't look as good as Venom. As I said, the Venom effect is a little iffy in the first place. Riot doesn't look better. And, the fight it just is what it is. And, like, I don't know how this happened, but after all the criticism that Amazing Spider-Man 2 got for putting the literal last shot of the movie, or at least before the credits started rolling, of that film in the trailer, the start of the Rhino fight, they did the same thing here. Because that whole, he's threatening the guy. He's like, you'll go rolling like a turd in the wind. That's the last scene of the movie. They put it in the trailer. I do not understand how Sony could have possibly done that again. What? Like that. How do you not learn? How? I'm like the one thing I'll give this credit, certainly if I'm going to compare it to The Amazing Spider-Man 2, is that for as much as it is kind of clunky and kind of predictable, it is still its own story. It is its own movie. It is not just an attempt to set up all the other Spider-Man related stuff that has been announced. It actually doesn't blatantly set up anything other than its own sequel, which does mean do not bother hanging around for a Tom Holland cameo. There is none. What there is, as far as this stuff, there is a mid-credit sequence which sets up Carnage. Now, I cannot remember if the actor who they have playing Cletus Cassidy, who will become Carnage, was announced anywhere. He is currently listed on the IMDb page in that part. I cannot remember if he was announced ahead of time or not. If he was, I forgot who it was, and seeing that was like, okay, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of do want to see him play Carnage. I think that would actually be really cool. So like on that basis alone, I weirdly kind of hope he gets a sequel, but it's not because it's good. And then there is a true, that's the mid-credit sequence. There is a post-credits, but it's detached from everything. It's just a segment out of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And I am pretty sure it is just a section directly lifted from that film. So that's what you get if you stick to the end. So don't bother waiting around for Tom Holland. He isn't there. I think I'll wrap it. You know what's the best way to explain this movie? This is the first movie that I can remember in decades that has a song in the credits that, and the name of the song is also the name of the movie with that repeatedly in the song. You know, like Men in Black, Wild Wild West, that style. It's that. And Eminem does it. Yeah, that's the kind of movie we're dealing with. It's not a waste of your time. It's not a waste of your money. If you are a fan of Venom, you might even get something out of it. But this is not a rush to the theater sort of situation, folks. But Venom, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do. There's links and there's buttons, including a link to the Patreon. Check them out if you feel like it. If you don't worry about it, because remember, you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.